Welcome to the world of science fiction. I am Adam, your narrator, where extraordinary tale come to life. Enjoy the journey. He swore he'd never use his weapons again, but what the alien girl said left him no choice. Mike Steele's weathered. Hands moved methodically over the hydroponic garden, outside his modest dwelling on the outskirts of New Haven. Colony the morning suns cast a purple-orange glow across the alien landscape, their light reflecting off his bald head and catching in his thick dark beard. His muscular frame, still impressive despite years of peaceful labor, was wrapped in simple work clothes rather than the tactical armor that lay hidden away with darker memories. The quiet was broken by the soft whir of approaching hover vehicles. Mike didn't look up, continuing to tend his crops with practiced care. He learned to tune out the sounds of the colony, just as he'd learned to tune out the memories of plasma fire and dying. Screams, another beautiful morning for gardening a human. The growly voice belonged to Krath, one of the few local Meridian merchants who actually treated him with respect rather than concealed fear. The alien's gray-scaled face split in what passed for a smile. Beautiful enough, Mike replied, his deep voice carrying the weight of unspoken years. Need another shipment of medicinal herbs, always the healing. Houses can't get enough of your earth varieties, though I'd make twice as much if you'd grow some of the more recreational strains. Mike fixed him with a stern look. You know my position on that. Craft can't blame an honest merchant for trying. Craft's secondary arms gestured in mock surrender. Though speaking of positions, there's talk in the city, the new overseers making changes. Not all of them good. Politics don't concern me anymore. Mike straightened his broad shoulders, tense despite his casual tone. I left that life behind. Did you? Or is it just sleeping like those weapons I know you keep locked away? Before Mike could respond, a commotion erupted from the direction of the city center. Even at this distance, they could hear raised voices and the distinctive whine of security speeders. Mike instinctively reached for a sidearm that hadn't been there in years, his combat Hun senses instantly alert. Seems the changes are starting sooner than expected. Kraft muttered, his scales shifting to a darker shade of concern through the morning haze. A figure was running toward them, slender, graceful, despite their obvious haste. As they drew closer, Mike could make out long silver blonde hair streaming behind them, and in pale skin with an almost metallic sheen, a luminari woman, one of the native species of New Haven. She stumbled as she reached them, and Mike caught her reflexively. Her golden eyes met his, filled with a mixture of desperation and determination that stirred something long dormant in his warrior's heart. Please, she gasped, her melodic voice carrying an edge of urgency. They're coming, the overseers force as well. They're not just making changes, they're purging anyone who opposes them. My family, they're there. Going to Mike felt the familiar ice settle in his gut, the cold calculation of combat that he tried so hard to forget. I don't get involved anymore, he said, but even as the words left his mouth, they felt hollow. They're killing people. She pressed her fingers, gripping his arm. Not just luminary, anyone who stands against them. The humans in the colony, too. They say it's for order, for peace, but it's just an excuse for power. I've heard what you once were. What you could do. Those stories are just that, stories. Mike growled, but his eyes had drifted toward his dwelling, where behind a dusty display lay the tools of his former trade. Then let them remain stories, she whispered, and let my people die, because one man chose to tend his garden rather than fight. One last time, the words hit him like a physical blow. He looked at his peaceful garden, then back at the city where smoke had begun to rise in the distance. Screams began to echo across the morning air. What's your name? He asked finally, his voice carrying the edge of steel that had been absent for so long. She replied, standing straighter despite her obvious fear. Mike nodded once, then turned toward his home. Krath, get her somewhere safe. I need to retrieve something. As he walked away, he heard Era call after him. I thought you didn't get involved anymore. He paused, looking back over his shoulder. So sometimes peace costs more than war. Inside his dwelling, Mike moved with purpose toward the sealed display case. Behind its dusty glass, his Mark 7 tactical combat system lay dormant. Matte black plates of advanced armor designed to interface directly with his nervous system, alongside an arsenal of weapons he'd hoped never to touch again. His hand hesitated over the biometric lock. 5 Years of peace, 5 years of trying to wash the blood from his conscience, and now the sound of explosion from the city. Made the decision for him, the glass shattered under his fist, and as he lifted the familiar weight of the armor. Memories flooded back not just of the killing, but of why he'd fought in the first place to protect, to stand against. Tyranny to be what humanity did best, a force for change in an unchanging galaxy. The armor molded to his body like a second skin neural, interfaces clicking into place, status displays flickered too. Life across his vision, as the system recognized its old master, his fingers wrapped around the grip of his primary. Weapon muscle memory making the motion smooth. Despite the ears, when he emerged from his home, both Krath and I stared. Gone was the quiet farmer. In his place stood a warrior, every line of his body radiating lethal purpose. Holy Krath! Whispered, all forearms raised in surprise. The stories didn't do you justice. Get to the old mining tunnels. Mike ordered, his voice modulated through the armor systems. There's a resistance network down there from the old days. Tell them Mike Steele is calling in his markers. You're going to help us, Air asked, hope lighting her golden eyes. Mike checked his weapons with practiced efficiency. I'm going to do what humans do best, remind the galaxy why they used to fear us. Used to. Krath chuckled nervously. My friend, I'm afraid of you. Right now another explosion rocked the colony. Mike's HUD highlighted multiple H signatures moving through the streets. The Overseer's forces were spreading out, systematic in their oppression. Alira, he said, I need to know everything about what's happening, but first, he raised his rifle as the whine of approaching speeders grew louder. I need to send a message. The first explosion caught the Overseer's patrol completely off guard. Mike's armor systems calculated the perfect trajectory, and the sonic detonator sent 3 security speeders coursing into each other in a spectacular display of calculated chaos. No casualties, yet he was sending a message: unauthorized combat activity detected in Sector 7. The panic in the guard's voice brought a grim smile to Mike's face as he moved through the shadows of New Haven architecture. His armor's adaptive camouflage shifted with each movement, making him nearly invisible. You know, Alaa whispered from her position behind him, having refused to seek shelter with Krath. I expected something more brutal from a legendary human warrior. Mike checked his tactical display before responding. Brutality is easy, precision takes skill. He turned to face her, his helmet's optics taking in her ethereal beauty. Even in the dim light, besides dead men, can't spread fear. Is that what you're doing? Spreading fear? I'm teaching them why humans earn their reputation. His voice carried a hint of pride. We don't just fight, we change the rules of engagement. They move through the colony's lower levels. Mike's HUD highlighting patrol patterns and security measures. The Overseer's forces were numerous but predictable, falling into standard military formations. Amateurs mistake your people, Mike said, as they paused in an abandoned marketplace. They're peaceful by nature, aren't they? A's metallic skin caught the light as she nodded. The luminary believe in harmony above all else. It's why the Overseer chose us. We're not fighters. That's about to change. Mike's fingers danced over his armor's control interface, sending out encrypted signals to dormant resistance networks. Sometimes the most peaceful people make the most determined warriors. When pushed too far, is that what happened to you? Her golden eyes studied him intently. What made you give up fighting in the first place? Mike was silent for a moment, checking their perimeter. I didn't give up fighting. I gave up killing the theirs. A difference. He turned to her, his helmet dissolving to reveal his face. Sometimes the hardest battle is knowing when not to pull the trigger. I stepped closer, her presence causing his armor's biosensors to register elevated heart rate and increased endorphin levels. And now he allowed himself a small smile. Now I remember why humans fight in the first place, not for glory or power, but for what's right. Their moment was interrupted by the sound of heavy boots and energy weapons powering up. A full squad of the Overseer's elite guards had them surrounded, their black armor a poor imitation of Mike's advanced suit. Well, the squad leader sneered, his reptilian features twisted in contempt. The human gardener decides to play hero, and with a luminary trar no less. Mike's helmet reformed around his head as his systems calculated multiple combat solutions. Gentlemen, his modulated voice carried across the marketplace, I'm going to give you one chance to walk away more Then I usually offer the guards laughed their weapons trained on the pair. The squad leader stepped forward. You may have been something once human, but you're just a relic now. Times have changed. Your right. Mike's armor hummed. To life weapon systems, engaging. I'm not the warrior I used to be. His hand found. AAS squeezing gently. I'm better. What followed was a demonstration of why humans had earned their reputation across the galaxy. Mike moved like liquid death, his armor enhancing already. Superhuman reflexes, the first 3 guards were disarmed before they could fire their weapons, clattering across the marketplace floor. The 4th and 5th found themselves unconscious before they registered movement. AA watched amazement as Mike systematically dismantled the entire squad without killing a single one. His movements were precise, efficient, and carried an almost artistic quality. This wasn't just combat. This was evolution in motion. The squad leader made a final desperate lunge, energy blade extending from his gauntlet. Mike caught the blade between armored fingers, crushing the emitter. Listen carefully, he told the trembling alien. Because I'm only going to say this once. Go back to your overseer. Tell him what happened here. Tell him that the human Gardner sends his regards and that his peaceful retirement is officially over. After the guards had fled, AA approached Mike, her hand trailing along his armor's smooth surface. That was impressive, but won't they come back with greater numbers? Counting on it. Mike checked his weapons. Fear is contagious right now. They're spreading the word about the human who took down an elite squad without killing anyone. That's more terrifying than death, is it? She moved closer, her natural luminescence creating patterns on his armor. I find it rather attractive. Mike's biosensor registered another spike in vital signs. Careful, he warned, though his voice carried a playful edge. I'm still in combat mode. Maybe that's exactly where I want you. Her fingers found the seams of his armor. Warriors aren't the only ones who can be dangerous, you know. Before Mike could respond, his tactical systems highlighted multiple approaching signatures. Companies coming, he said, reluctantly stepping back. Time to show them why humans never really retire. We just wait for the right moment to remind the galaxy what we're capable of. Eyes smile held both promise and challenge. Lead the way, warrior. Show me why they call it humanity. Yeah, the old mining tunnels beneath New Haven buzzed with an energy Mike hadn't felt in years. Dozens of luminary civilians there, metallic skin gleaming in the low light, watched intently as he demonstrated basic combat stances. Their natural grace made them quick learners, though their peaceful nature still showed in their hesitant movements. You're thinking too much, Mike called out. Moving through the group combat isn't about perfection, it's about survival. Your enemy won't give you time to contemplate the moral implications of your actions, says the man who gave up fighting because of moral implications. I teased from her position at his side. She'd proven to be an exceptional student, her natural agility complementing his combat instruction perfectly. Mike shot her a look that was half exasperation, half admiration. There's a difference between understanding the weight of combat and being paralyzed by it. His armor sensors picked up her elevated heart rate. Whenever he approached a detail that both distracted and intrigued him, the training session was interrupted by CRFT. Arrival scales had darkened with concern. Mike, we've got trouble. The overseers bringing in specialists, professional hunters. About time, Mike muttered, his tactical systems already calculating potential scenarios. Who are they? The Crimson Talon craft. Secondary arms twitched nervously. They're saying their commander has history with you. Mike went still. His armor's temperature regulation suddenly working overtime. Commander Raxon, you know him? Ala moved closer, her concern evident. I know him. Mike's voice had grown cold. He was there the day I swore off weapons, the day everything went wrong. But the training room had gone quiet, all eyes on the human warrior. Mike activated his armor's holographic projector, displaying an image of a battle-scarred alien with cybernetic enhancements covering half his face. 5 years ago, I led a classified operation on the frontier world of Nexus Prime. Raxon was my target, a notorious arms dealer supplying weapons to insurgent forces. The mission was simple: eliminate him and his operation. What went wrong? A's hand found his armored shoulder. Everything Mike's fists clenched. The intel was bad. The weapons facility was actually a refugee camp. Raxon was using civilians as human shields, hiding his operation among innocents. I hesitated, my team didn't. Understanding dawned in A's golden eyes. That's why you quit, I couldn't stop them. In time, the casualties. Mike shook his head. Raxon escaped in the chaos, but not. Before I destroyed his operation, he lost everything that day, including half his face to my plasma rifle, and now he's. Here Kraft's scales had lightened slightly, working for the Overseer. No. Mike's tactical display highlighted patterns in recent security movements. The Overseer's is working for him. This whole operation, the purge, the oppression, it's all about drawing me out. Axons. Been planning his revenge for years. Air's luminescence flickered with anger. He's using my people as bait. Classic. Rickson. Mike began checking his weapons. He always did prefer collateral damage to direct confrontation. One of the luminary trainees, a young male named Thern, stepped forward. Then we'll show him the cost of underestimating us. You've taught us well. Human. Mike studied the gathered civilians, no fighters now. Their metallic skin gleamed with determination. Their movements already showing the confidence of warriors in training. In their eyes, he saw something he'd thought lost. Forever purpose. Raxon thinks he knows what he's dealing with. Mike addressed the group. He remembers the warrior. I was ruthless, efficient, deadly, but he's never faced what we are now. He turned to AA. Your people's grace combined with human combat doctrine. We're creating something new, something beautiful. AA added, her fingers intertwining with his armored ones. The gesture sent his biosensors into overdrive, something terrifying. Kraft corrected, though his tone carried admiration. The luminary were always considered too peaceful to fight now. Look at them. Mike's tactical systems highlighted multiple approach vectors through the city's infrastructure. Raxon will expect me to come alone. His ego demands personal revenge. Instead, we're going to show him why you never back a human into a corner, especially one with something worth fighting. For he turned to Allura, his helmet dissolving to reveal his face. I need you to lead the second team. If I'm right about Roxanne's involvement, there will be evidence in the Overseer's compound. Find it. Trying to protect me. Her golden eyes sparkled with challenge. Trying to utilize our best assets. Your people know the compound layout, and you've proven yourself more than capable. His hand brushed her cheek. Besides, I need someone I trust watching my back. The moment was charged with unspoken emotions, the air between them electric with possibility. Finally, AA nodded. Just promise me something. Name it. When this is over, when Raxon is dealt with. Her luminescence brightened. We're going to have a long discussion about your retirement plans. Mike couldn't help but smile, assuming we survive. Oh, we'll survive. She moved closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. I have plans for you, human warrior, and they don't involve gardening. The training room erupted in supportive cheers and good-natured teasing. The luminary natural empathy picking up on the emotional undercurrent. Mike cleared his throat, his armor working overtime to regulate his vital signs. Right then, his helmet reformed as he addressed the group. We move at nightfall. 3 teams, infiltration, evidence gathering, and direct assault. Remember your training, trust your instincts, and most importantly, he paused, letting his words carry weight. Remember why we fight, not for revenge, not for glory, but for the right to live free from fear. As the fighters broke BR into their assigned groups, Kraft approached Mike. You know, when I first met you, I thought you were just another burned-out warrior hiding from his P. I was wrong. Oh, you weren't hiding. You were waiting for the right cause, the right moment. His eyes flickered to AA, the right person. Mike watched as his unlikely army prepared for battle, his tactical systems already plotting their approach. Sometimes the hardest part of being a warrior is knowing when to put down your weapons, and sometimes he checked his rifle. Sometimes the universe reminds you why you picked them up in the first place. The twin moons of New Haven cast long shadows across the colony central district, as Mike's tactical systems highlighted multiple heat signatures in the Overseer's compound. His armor's stealth systems kept him virtually invisible as he observed the patrol patterns, but something fell off. Perimeter team status report. He vocalized through the encrypted comm channel. Eastern sector clear came TH's whispered response. The young luminary had proven himself a natural at covert operations, but Mike these patterns don't match our intel. Notice that too. Mike's HUD, he analyzed the guard rotations. They're too obvious, almost like a trap. The voice that cut through His calm made his blood freeze. Really, Mike? Did you think I wouldn't anticipate? Your every move, Commander. Ron's face appeared on his tactical display, the cybernetic enhancements gleaming in the moonlight, but it wasn't coming from the compound, it was broadcasting from the mining tunnels. Mike breathed. Your luminary girlfriend, Ron's mechanical eye glowed with malicious amusement. She's quite safe for now, though, I must say. Her companion was quite cooperative. The feed switched to show CRA, his scales pale. With fear standing beside Roxanne's forces in the resistance base, the merchant's secondary arms were bound, but his primary hands were free and holding a data tablet. I'm sorry, Mike Craw's voice trembled. They threatened my family. My clutch Krath has been most helpful. Braxton continued, providing intelligence, monitoring your movements, even helping us identify the perfect moment to strike, though I must admit I never expected you to build such an interesting little army. Mike's mind raced through scenarios. His combat system calculating odds. What do you want, Raxon? 1. I want you to understand loss. Old friend, like I did on Nexus Prime. The scarred commander's organic eye narrowed. Did you really think that refugee camp was an accident? Those civilians were my people, Mike, my family, hidden away from the war until your team's precision strike destroyed everything. The revelation hit Mike like a physical blow. You're lying. The intel was perfect. Your team knew exactly what they were hitting, but you, Roxanne's laugh was bitter. You hesitated. The great Mike Steele, the unstoppable human warrior, developed a conscience at exactly the wrong moment. In the background, Mike could see luminary resistance fighters being rounded up. Their training, no match for Roxanne's veteran soldiers, but AA wasn't among them. Where is she? Mike's voice carried deadly promise. Safe, as I said. In fact, Raxon stepped aside to reveal Era. Unbound but surrounded by guards, her golden eyes met the camera defiantly. She's about to witness history. The day humanity's greatest warrior falls. Mike A's voice was steady despite her situation. The data files, we found them before they caught us. About Nexus Prime. You need to. A guard moved to silence her, but AA was faster. Her training kicked in as she dropped low, sweeping the guard's legs and snatching his weapon. The move was perfect, exactly as Mike had taught her. Chaos erupted in the tunnels. The captured luminary fighters, seeing their leader act, launched into action. They might lack experience, but their natural grace combined with Mike's training made them formidable. Roxanne's forces found themselves fighting shadows as the luminary's metallic skin reflected the low light, creating disorienting patterns. Impressive, Raxon admitted, drawing his own weapon. You've taught them well, but not well enough. The feed cut out, but not before Mike saw LRA accessing a terminal, her fingers flying over the controls. His tactical display suddenly lit up with new data files about Nexus Prime, streaming directly from the Overseer secured network. Sir. Theon's voice crackled through the communication orders. Mike scanned the incoming data, his armor's processors working overtime to decrypt it. What he saw made his blood boil. Mission logs, command authorization, target assessments, all proving that Raxon had orchestrated the entire Nexus Prime operation. He'd sacrificed his own people to discredit Mike, and his team, knowing the truth would break them, knew plan. Mike's voice carried the edge of controlled fury. Raxon wants me. He's going to get exactly what he asked for. His armor weapon systems powered up to full capacity. All teams execute Protocol Omega. We're done playing defense, but sir, the compound is empty. Raton's ego wouldn't let him spring this trap without watching personally. Mike was already moving, his enhanced muscles carrying him across rooftops with inhuman speed. He wants to see me break. Instead, we're going to remind him why humans earned their reputation in the first place. As he ran his tactical systems highlighted the quickest route to the mining tunnels in his HUD. The data from Nexus Prime continued to stream evidence not just of Raton's betrayal, but of a larger conspiracy. The Overseer, the Purge, even Kraft's betrayal, all carefully orchestrated to draw Mike out of retirement. You know, Aw's voice suddenly cut through his cal, slightly breathless, but alive. When this is over, we really need to discuss your taste in enemies. Relief flooded through him. A little busy right now. Beautiful. Oh, I no, just thought you'd like to know that your training paid off. These Crimson Talon soldiers, not nearly as tough as they think they are in the background. Mike could hear the sounds of combat. His HUD showed multiple hostile signatures going dark as the Luminari resistance fought back. With everything he taught them, "That's my girl," he muttered, allowing himself a brief smile. Before focusing on the task ahead, "Ali, can you hold them, please?" Her confidence made his heart raise. "We've got this covered, just deal with our cybernetic friend." And Mike, "Yes, when this is over." Her voice dropped to a sultry whisper that made his armor's temperature regulation kick in. "I expect a proper date, one that doesn't involve combat training." "Yes, ma'am." Mike checked his weapons one final time as he approached the tunnel entrance. "But first, I need to have a chat with an old friend about the true meaning of loss, the mining tunnels." Entrance loomed before him, dark, and for Boeing inside, he could hear the sounds of battle, his trained luminary fighters giving Raxon forces more than they bargained for. But beyond that, in the deepest chamber, waited the architect of all this chaos. Mike's helmet dissolved, revealing his grim smile to the night airtime, to remind the galaxy why you never force a human to break his word. His armor hummed with deadly purpose as the helmet reformed, especially when that word involves weapons. The mining tunnels echoed with the sounds of combat as Mike descended deeper into the complex. His tactical display painted a chaotic picture. Luminari resistance fighters executing perfect guerrilla strikes against Raxon forces, their natural grace amplified by human combat doctrine. Mike Kraft's voice cut through the comm channel. "The secondary tunnel. I can help, please. Bit busy trusting people right now, old friend," Mike replied, his armor systems tracking multiple hostiles. "They have my clutch and stasis pods level 3 section D." Kraft scales shifted rapidly, a sign of extreme distress. "But I placed a bypass code in the security system when I betrayed you. I can make it right." Mike's ad highlighted an approaching squad of Crimson Talon troops, alas, status upper levels secured. She responded, slightly breathless, "These mercenaries aren't used to fighting opponents. They can't see properly. Our metallic skin is driving their targeting systems crazy. That's my girl." Pride colored his voice. "Kraft, if this is another trap, it's not." The merchant's voice carried raw emotion. "You showed my people mercy when you could have killed us all on Nexus Prime. You tried to stop the massacre. I owe you more than betrayal." Mike made his decision. "Theon, take your team to Section D. Free Crafts clutch, then get them to safety." "Already moving, sir." The tunnel opened into a vast chamber. Mining equipment scattered like ancient monuments. Mike's tactical systems highlighted defensive positions, weapon imp placements, and at the center, Commander Rixon. Finally, the cybernetic commander stood alone, his enhanced frame gleaming in the low light. "No more games. No more proxies, just you and me, Mike." "Funny thing about game," Mike replied, his armor's weapon systems cycling through combat solutions. "They teach you who people really are, like how you sacrifice your own people to destroy my reputation. I sacrific nothing Ron's mechanical. I flared you, and your team did the killing. Yeah, I merely arrange the stage. To what end?" Mike moved in a careful arc, keeping Raxon centered. "All this elaborate revenge, just to draw me out of retirement." Raxon laughed, the sound harsh and metallic. "Revenge? This was never about revenge, old friend. This was about proving a point." "Humans," he spat the word, "you think you're special because you can switch between peace and war at will, because you choose your battles as opposed to being manipulated into them." Mike's sensors detected movement in the shadows. Crimson Talon troops taking position. "Your very nature is a threat to galactic stability." Roxon's organic eye blaze with fanatical intensity. "Species should know their place. Warriors fight civilians, produce leaders lead, but humans," he gestured at Mike with his cybernetic arm, "you blur the lines. A warrior who becomes a gardener, a peaceful race that can transform into an army overnight. You're an aberration that needs to be eliminated." Sir Kraw's urgent voice cut through the sea. "The stasis pods, they're not just holding my clutch. There are dozens of them filled with civilians from across the sector, all species that showed signs of adapting like humans." Mike's blood ran cold as his tactical systems processed the implications. "It wasn't just about me, was it? New Haven was an experiment. Push the peaceful Luminari until they break, then eliminate them before they can evolve. Very good." Raxon drew his weapon, a prototype plasma cannon that hummed with deadly energy. "Humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy isn't your technology or your strength. It's your example you show other species." That they can change, adapt, choose their own path, can't have that, can we, the chamber erupted in plasma fire as Roxanne's hidden troops opened up, but Mike was already moving his armors. Enhanced reflexes carrying him between cover points, the training sessions with Luminari had taught him new ways to move. Combining human power with alien grace, Mike Aw's voice carried concern where. Picking up energy signatures, the whole tunnel system is rigged to collapse. Of course, it is Mike returned fire his. Shots precise and calculated, can't leave evidence of genocide. Right, Rixon, the cybernetic commander, charged forward his. Enhanced frame moving with unnatural speed, the weak serve the strong. Mike, that's the natural order, humanity's gift. Of choice is a poison that must be purged. Their clash was titanium against. Titanium advanced human combat, armor versus cybernetic enhancement. Mike's tactical systems struggled to predict Roxanne's movements. The commander's upgrades made him faster, stronger than any organic being. Should be Sir Krath Cutin. I have accessed the main controls. Yeah, I can override the charges, but what someone has to stay and maintain. The bypass the system keeps trying to reset. Mike caught Rax's plasma blade on his armor's forearm, the energy discharge, creating a spectacular light show. Little busy here, Crom. I know. The merchant's voice carried quiet determination. Consider this my apology, old friend. Get our people out, all of them. Craft, don't you dare. Too late. There was a smile in his voice. Besides, someone needs to show the galaxy that humans aren't the only ones who can choose their path. Now finish this fight, you magnificent bastard, and take care of my clutch. Before Mike could respond, Rex Imper pressed his attack. The commander's cybernetic enhancements sparked and as he pushed them beyond safety limits. Die knowing you failed. Rax's mechanical eye blazed. The weak will serve, the strong will rule, and humanity's poison will be purged from the galaxy. Mike's tactical display flashed a warning. Power surge detected in Raxan's systems. The commander was overloading his enhancements, turning himself into a living bomb. You still don't get it, do you? Mike's armor synchronized with his movements as he pressed forward. Humanity's gift isn't weakness, it's choice. The choice to change, to grow, to be more than what others say. We should be. His fist connected with Roxanne's cybernetic jaw, the impact cracking the metal. The choice to fight when necessary. Another strike shattered the mechanical eye, and the choice to show mercy when possible. Roxanne staggered back his system, sparking. Then choose human. Save your precious civilians or stop me from taking this whole facility down with me. Wrong choice. Mike's armor powered up to maximum capacity. I status on the evacuation. All civilians clear, including Kraft's clutch. He's still at the controls, buying a time. Good. Mike faced the raging commander. Because I choose option 3, his armor's targeting system locked onto the exact point where Raton's organic and cybernetic parts connected. One shot perfectly placed would end this. And what's that? Roxanne snarled. Mike smiled behind his helmet. I choose to remind you why humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. We don't just fight with weapons. The shot was perfect, disabling Roxanne's enhancements without killing him. We fight with hope. As the commander collapsed his systems, powering down, Mike activated his comm. Krath, get out of there. That's an order from your friend. But the system will have to manage without you. Some choices matter more than victory. The mining tunnels shook as charges began to detonate, but Mike's tactical systems confirmed what he already knew. His people were safe, all of them. 2 weeks after the battle in the mining tunnels, Mike stood in his rebuilt high-drop pick garden watching New Haven's twin suns paint the sky in familiar purple-orange hues. His armor cleaned and maintained stood in his display case, no longer hidden behind dusty glass, but proudly displayed as a symbol of both war and peace. You know, Ah's voice carried across the garden as she approached, her metallic skin catching the morning light. Most people would be relaxing after saving a colony and exposing a galactic conspiracy. Most people aren't human, Mike replied, turning to face her. The sight of her still made his heart race, especially now that she moved with the confident grace of a warrior, while maintaining her natural luminary elegance. Clearly, she stepped closer, her golden eyes sparkling with mischief. Is that why you're still keeping our guest in the basement? Mike's expression darkened slightly below his dwelling in a specially constructed cell. Commander Raxanne sat waiting for judgment, The cybernetic commander enhanced parts had been disabled, leaving him more machine than functional. Being the coalition tribunal arrives tomorrow, Mike said, his hands automatically reaching for Allah as she drew near. The one answers about the experimentation, the targeted elimination of adaptable species, and her fingers traced the contours of his muscled arm. What do you want? Before he could answer, the familiar sound of crafts hover transport approached. The merchant had recovered well from his ordeal, his scales now a healthy shade, and all four arms moving with their usual animation. His clutch saw from Raxon stasis pods had become regular visitors to Mike's garden. Hope I'm not interrupting anything intimate. Krath called out, his secondary arms making suggestive gestures that had a layer of laughing. Your timing is as impeccable as ever, old friend, Mike grumbled, though without real annoyance. If anything, craft betrayal and redemption had strengthened their friendship, forging it in the fires of shared struggle. Speaking of timing, Kraft's scales shifted to more serious hue. The Luminary Council is requesting your presence, Mike. Both of you, actually. It seems they're having trouble processing recent events. Can't blame them, I said, her hand finding Mike's. Their entire worldview has been challenged. Peaceful species learning combat, working with a human warrior, standing up against oppression, breaking every traditional role in galactic society. Krath added, you humans really do have a way of shaking things up. Mike surveyed his garden, remembering how it had all started. Sometimes things need shaking. Speaking of which, he turned to Krath. How's the new business venture? The merchant scales rippled with pride. The combat training academy is already overbooked. Seems lots of peaceful species are interested in learning how to defend themselves. Your Luminar graduates are proving to be excellent instructors, and the weapons asked carefully, knowing it was still a sensitive topic for Mike. Limited, controlled, or and purely defensive. Krath assured them we're teaching choice, not conquest, though I have to admit his scales shifted to an amused pattern, watching traditionally non-combatant species discover their inner warrior is quite entertaining. A commotion from below interrupted their conversation. Mike's security systems alerted him to movement in Raxon's cell. Shall we? Gestured toward the house. One last conversation before the tribunal arrives. Mike nodded, and the three of them made their way to the secure basement. Raxon sat in his cell, his organic eyes studying them as they entered. The commander had lost his imposing presence without his cybernetic enhancements, but his gaze still burned with intensity. Come to gloat. Ratan's voice was weaker without his vocal enhancers. Come to understand, Mike corrected, standing before the cell. All this effort, all this planning, just to stop species from evolving, from choosing their own path. You still don't see it, do you? Ron leaned forward. Order requires structure. Species must know their place, their role. What you've done here, he gestured at I, with his remaining organic arm, teaching warriors to garden peaceful races to fight. It's an abomination. No, AA stepped forward, her luminescence brightening with emotion. What's abominable is denying people the right to grow, to change, to choose their own destiny. Pretty words, Rixon sneered, but look at what your choice has brought. Chaos, upheaval, the breaking of ancient traditions. Growth, Krath interjected, his scales shifting thoughtfully. It's brought growth. My people were merchants for countless generations, but now we're teaching others to defend themselves, to stand up for what's right. That's not chaos, that's evolution. Mike studied his former enemy, seeing not a monster, but a relic of a dying way of thinking. The tribunal will want to make an example of you, he said quietly. But first I want you to see something. He activated a holographic display showing scenes from across New Haven. Luminary warriors training alongside other species, former Crimson Talon soldiers, learning peaceful trades, different races working together to rebuild the colony. This is humanity's true gift to the galaxy. My Mike explained, not our strength or our technology, but our understanding that everyone deserves the chance to be more than what others say they should be. And what about you, Mike? Roxanne's organic eye fixed on him, the warrior who became a gardener only to become a warrior again. What does that prove? It proves that true strength isn't about choosing one path and sticking to it blindly. Mike felt I's hand slip into his. It's about having the courage to change paths when necessary, and the wisdom to know when to fight and when to tend your garden. The tribunal will execute me, Raxon said matter-of-factly maybe Mike. Turn to leave or maybe they'll learn something from all this two-choice works. Both ways, Commander, even for those who tried to deny it to others, and as they left the basement I pulled him close. You know, for someone who swore off weapons, you've become quite the philosopher. Well, he smiled, drawing her into his arms. I had some inspiration. A certain luminary woman showed me that sometimes picking up weapons again isn't about returning to what you were, but about protecting what you become. Smooth talker, she teased, her luminescence creating patterns on his skin. So about that proper date you promised me. Oh no, Krath interrupted, all forearms raised in mock surrender. That's my cue to leave, but first his scales shifted to a formal pattern. The council meeting, they're talking about making some changes, big ones. They want your input, both of you. Mike looked at his garden, then at his displayed armor, and finally at the woman in his arms. Tell them we'll be there. After all, he smiled, humans aren't the only ones who get to choose their path anymore. 6 months after the tribunal knew Haven had transformed, the coalition's judgment had surprised everyone. Instead of execution, Raxon was sentenced. To help integrate the species, he tried to suppress his cybernetic enhancements, permanently modified to prevent aggression. The irony of forcing him to witness the very evolution he'd fought against wasn't lost on anyone. Mike stood on the balcony of his expanded dwelling, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues. The garden below had grown into a community center where species from across the sector came to learn both combat and cultivation. The perfect blend of peace and strength, just like the man who'd created it. Credit for your thoughts, Ai's voice carried across the evening air as she approached, her silver blonde hair catching the last rays of sunlight. Her metallic skin seemed to glow with an inner fire that matched the intensity in her golden eyes. Just appreciating the view, Mike replied, turning to face her. The sight of her still took his breath away, especially now that she moved with the confident grace of both warrior and diplomat. The garden or me? She stepped closer, her luminescence creating intimate patterns in the growing darkness. Both his hand found her waist naturally, drawing her close, though I have to admit one view is particularly distracting tonight. Their relationship had deepened over the months, evolving like everything else in New Haven. What had started as mutual respect and attraction had grown into something more profound, more primal, yet somehow more elegant. You know, AA whispered, her fingers tracing the contours of his chest. Traditional luminary courtship usually takes years of careful negotiation and formal arrangements. And how do you feel about tradition? Mike's voice had grown husky, his body responding to her touch. I think. She pressed closer, her luminescence intensifying. I think some traditions are meant to be broken, especially when there's a human involved. The moment was interrupted by a familiar hovering sound. Oh, for the love of the void, Kraft's voice carried from below. Can't you two get a room, preferably one without windows facing the public garden? Mike laughed, keeping Ike close. Your timing remains impeccable, old friend. Actually, Kraft's scales shifted to a formal pattern as he landed on the balcony this time. It's intentional. The councils made their decision about the expansion proposal. The news sobered them. Both they'd spent weeks arguing for a New Haven to become an official training center for the coalition, a place where species could learn to transcend their tradition roles safely and legally, and Ah's hand found Mike squeezing gently. They approved it. Kraft's scales rippled with joy, but there's more. They want to establish similar centers across coalition space. They're calling it the Human Integration Protocol, helping species adapt and evolve while maintaining stability. That's Mike shook his head in amazement. That's not what I expected when I first picked up my weapons again. Life, rarely, is what we expect, AA said softly, especially when humans are involved. Kraft scales shifted to a teasing pattern. Speaking of involvement, I'll leave you two to celebrate. Just remember. Public garden below, impressionable younglings. About after he left, AA turned to Mike with an intensity that made his heart race. He has a point about celebration, she murmured, her luminescence creating intimate patterns on his skin. His voice was rough with emotion. Are you sure your people's traditions? My people are learning to choose their own paths, she interrupted, pressing closer. And I choose you, the warrior who became a gardener, who became a warrior again, who showed us all that change isn't just possible, it's necessary. Their first kiss was like a Supernova intense, transformative, inevitable, the union of human passion. And luminary grace of strength, and elegance of tradition and revolution. Later, as they lay together in the privacy of their bedroom, air's luminescence created beautiful patterns. Across their intertwined forms, she whispered, tracing the scars on his chest in luminary, culture this kind of. Union is considered a formal bond, no going back. Mike pulled her closer, his heart full. Good thing, I'm not planning on going anywhere the next morning. They stood together in the garden watching, as new students arrived from across the sector. Krath supervised the registration process, his scales shifting happily, as he directed various species to their